If you haven't watched part 1, the link is in the description below. In this video, we're going to attach the YM3812 V3 PCB to the faceplate. First, gather all the components that are mounted to the faceplate. 18 10 kilo linear potentiometers, 11 on-on toggle switches, 35 jacks, one of which needs to be a stereo jack, and 18 100 kilo through-hole resistors. Start by attaching the potentiometers to the faceplate. A 10 mm deep socket is useful for securing the nuts. Next, add the switches, aligning the toggles to go up and down. The final part mounted to the faceplate are the jacks. If you don't have a jack nut driver, a small pair of pliers can be used. Just be careful not to scratch the faceplate. Note that the bend connection requires a stereo jack. All the other connections can be mono. Now onto the pre-wiring. The rows of potentiometers need to have their left and right pins all connected together. Once that is done, wire a column together to connect all the rows. Two potentiometers on the left side of the PCB are wired together as well. These have their own connections to the positive and negative voltage rails on the PCB. Therefore, there is no need to wire them to the other 16 potentiometers. Next, we turn our attention to the switches. The upper and lower connections on the rows can all be soldered together as shown. The following step is connecting all the grounds together on all the switches and jacks, and I like to ground the potentiometers to reduce potential noise, as this is a non-metallic faceplate. Now take a 100K resistor, trim one lead, and solder it to the center pin of each potentiometer. Then take a piece of wire and solder the other lead of the resistor to the tip connection of the corresponding jack. This is done for all 18 potentiometers. This allows the signal to be patched into the jack to override the potentiometer without complex switching circuitry. Connect all the lower connections of the switches together. This will be connected to plus 5 volts later. Now that all the pre-wiring is done, connections to the PCB can finally be made. Start by attaching two short lengths of wire to the PCB, one on each corner. These connections are VEE plus 5 volts. Then set the PCB on something so that it rests flat about halfway up the faceplate. Then solder these first two connections. I find it is easy to then solder from one end of the PCB to the other, doing each connection sequentially. The inputs on the PCB are all in order so that should not require many wires crossing over each other. These are all the analog connections for the two operators attached. These are the digital connections for the operators attached. And all the control connections attached. As you can see, with almost 60 wires connecting the faceplate to the PCB, the connection is quite rigid. Now that the hot work is done, all the chips can be installed. All that is left to do is mount it in your rack, attach the power connection, and make some noise. Thanks for watching.